Hello. Unconscious bias is a very complex kind of theory, and also in practice and kind of model, and there's lots and lots and lots of things to get through. 20 minutes won't do it justice, so I am going to just kind of hit the surface of it. So I do apologise for any neuroscientists, biologists, anybody who kind of knows this stuff properly, who feels I'm giving it short change. It's very much around kind of just really getting to the key points, giving you a bit of a sense of what it means, what impact it can have, and then hopefully that will kind of spur you on to maybe look it up more. Some of your organisations will already be considering how this affects diversity and how it affects, I suppose, just generally the operation of the organisation. So I've got a clicker, so I'm going to press that. So it is, like I said, a brief info. I keep saying that, but it's just because I don't want to kind of be done for dumbing down something which is quite complicated. So I suppose the way to kind of start to contextualise this is that, they've done multiple studies. They did a study of over 800 companies to see. We've had lots of diversity training over the last 30 years. There's lots of work about diversity. We talk about it all the time. It's really annoying now, actually, isn't it, Dawn? Can we just move on? And actually what they found was that there wasn't that great an impact in terms of all the diversity training, all the courses, all the discussions that had been had. And said, actually, if something's been so important, so prevalent, why hasn't it actually had an impact on what we do and kind of how we do things? So something that's been kind of, around for a number of years now was then the concept of actually, if we're all consciously saying we're not sexist, homophobic, racist, we, love people from all backgrounds, we don't care about somebody's accent, then why is it that our organisations, our communities, our friends, our kind of ways of thinking, our television programmes, our theatre productions, why do they all still look quite similar to how they used to look 10, 20, 30 years ago? And so moving on, ooh, hello, I'm going backwards, sorry. Right, so just a quick one. Now, some of you will have seen this, so I do apologise. But for those of you who haven't, are those two tables the same size? That's my question. You can just shout yes or no, it's fine, I'm not... No idea. I like that answer, because that proves that you're not kind of going, well, it's about unconscious bias, there must be something. They are. And this is just kind of one of those kind of optical not tricks really, but it's something that they show to kind of give an example of actually what you see isn't always what you think. And often, I have got tracing paper and the tables in the back, if you really don't trust me. But the idea here is that actually we always think we know what we're seeing, we always think we know what we're thinking, we always actually feel we're very objective, fair, intelligent people. We are very intelligent people. However, the fact is we are still kind of, we're a slave to kind of our brain, our functioning, our bodies, our biology. And actually, there are a number of things that we do that we aren't necessarily in control of, or aren't necessarily making the choices that we think in the way that we think we're making them. So going on to that. So in a nutshell, how do unconscious bias affect us and why do we care? They make linking things that we don't naturally think of going together difficult. Now I would say in here, I've got hundreds and hundreds, I've got about 50 slides, I've got about 100 pieces of paper. I'm not going to go through all of that. But the idea is that there's so much information out there in terms of, what effect does that have? If linking things together don't work, actually, does that matter? Because I'm quite rational, I can sort it out, I'll be all right. Actually, what that ends up meaning is that our brain, with the unconscious biases, there we are, do that, perfect, shows that actually there's something that always happens. They're in our head, effectively, our brain, the way it works is that we have automatic and rapid thoughts. Given the kind of figures, which is always my favourite kind of piece to do, is that our conscious brain processes 40 bits of information per second. So that's 40 bits, conscious brain. Our unconscious brain processes 11 million bits of information. So if you think about that disparity, and there's some physiological bits of processing as well that goes on, but actually if you think about that, we all think that we're thinking hard about what we're doing. We can't. I came to Nottingham last night, the one-way system around here just befuddled me. I just didn't know. I spent half an hour to make a 5-minute journey. And it's because I didn't know where I was. I was going round and round and round. But as human beings, when something's new, we have to work hard at it. But actually, generally, day to day, we get up, we go to the bathroom, we go shopping, we go to work, we kind of see our friends, we know people's names. All of that happens because our body has kind of been built to react, to function. You know, if we had to think about everything that we did every moment of the day, we wouldn't even get out of bed. You know, it'd be so hard to kind of get done. We've found a way to kind of work out how do we move forward, how do we progress, and actually how do we just make things work. How many of you have ever driven a car to somewhere and then it got there and gone, I really don't know how I did that, or I actually can't remember going down those 4 streets. Actually, that's our body's way. We're used to doing things so automatically, and that's because our brain is so complicated that it has to be like that. Well, that then leads me to the fact that, you know, our brain's doing all of this stuff, but in a work context, it's fine, because actually, I always appoint the right person, and it's always objective. I always celebrate and mentor and talk to all the people that I feel are objectively brilliant or kind or loving. And I only promote the best people. It's absolutely what I do. So just a show of hands, how many of you believe that statement to be true about yourself? Good, because often they say the people who kind of feel they've got no or limited biases are the ones you've got an issue with. So that's good. But yeah, the fact is we all want to be as objective and fair and kind, which is good. You know, I should probably always caveat kind of my talks with, you know, I'm not talking about outward sexism, racism, homophobia, any other kind of ism at all. You know, actually, there are some people who consciously are prejudiced. That's not this course. I'm just going to focus on actually, you know, things that we think or we don't think that we're doing. I'm just going to check on time because I talk quite a lot. So, you know, we think that we do this. In my lovely stack of information, so for those of you who are still a bit like, yeah, the brain processes lots of information, but still, when I talk to people, my circle of friends, my job, it's still all very kind of unbiased. I'll give you an example. So in one research project, lawyers were asked to rate a research memo by a junior associate. Those who thought the author was white gave 20% higher scores than those who they thought were black. Grad students were asked to evaluate the quality of different proposals. Same proposal, different names, male, female. Surprisingly, better ratings given to men. So we're starting to kind of see a pattern here where everybody says this is what I do, but you look at workforces, you look at what we're doing, you look at the stage and what we're performing or who's performing, and you start to say, ooh, does that mean objectively all women are just not that good? Or objectively people who are different aren't as, clever? It's not necessarily that. Well, it isn't that. And actually, it's around thinking about how we are kind of continuing to promote kind of the same views, the same visions, and lack of diversity, really, and innovation. The reason why we have medicine, the reason why we have cars, the reason why we have all of the great things we have now compared to even 5 years ago, let alone 50 or 500, is because we thought of innovation. We did something different. People kind of started to kind of wonder what if, and that's the most important thing we need to do for organisations. A lot of the talk here has been around creativity and innovation and diversity, and I expect it's been year on year. We talked about why diversity is good, but actually, again, this is probably worth mentioning. It's not just about the right thing to do. Yes, it is because we're a culture, an organisation, we're a community of lots of different people, but it's also because it's the bottom line is more effective. You're going to get more audiences. You're going to get more creativity. You're going to have a better workforce. You're going to have ideas that are going to be more successful. All of those things are all they're all facts in terms of when they've done research about what does innovation, creativity, what impact does diversity have on it, and actually it's a really good one. So I am going to move on because I feel I'm doing too much. So I've already mentioned a couple of stats. So what qualities would you use to describe a leader, a man, and a woman? So this is one that I like to use because, when we talk again around, and it was mentioned here earlier, we have some, in great positions, we might have, colleagues or a workforce that's becoming more diverse, but actually our leadership isn't necessarily reflective. And actually there is something in here around qualities that we associate with people. So you wouldn't be surprised to learn that 70% of the qualities that were used to describe a leader were attributed to men, but actually not to women. And I think it was the 40%, I'm trying to get my facts right off my I did print off paper because I tried to be ecologically friendly, but actually it doesn't work. But it doesn't work, do you know what, I'm printing it off next time. But effectively what you have is that another example of, when we think about a leader, this is women as well. So when you look at a lot of studies, and they've done this with various associations, it's not just men that go, actually, women are better at housework and caring for children, and men are better at being leaders. Women have the same patterns of thought, and often that's because of socialisation, the way we've grown up, the way we've been brought up. Also your culture, your family, that's probably what you've seen, that's what norm is. And that's the critical thing, is that actually our brain has to operate in a way of, actually, it's so complicated out there. What is the most simplest thing to do? Right, well, I've got to think about my shortcut. Who do I know? My mum, right, she looks after me when I was little, right, that's women. Okay, colleagues, right, that's women. TV, theatre, books. We build a pattern over the years. This one is around, so 50% is figures. I'm going to quickly move on, but just, so that was the CV test, which I'm sure you've all read about. Over the years, they've done multiple variations of this. So send a CV out, just like I talked about some of the studies around, research papers, which are effectively same CV, pretty much, different names. And that's one which basically means that if you're from a black or minority ethnic background, you've got to send twice as many CVs out in order to get the same kind of reaction and response from somebody. So again, we are judging objectively. There's something there then if for some reason, when you kind of do that effect of kind of anonymising it, you kind of get a different one. My lovely slide with the, you see? So this is something that very big research piece, and a lot of work went into orchestras, especially in the States, why there weren't a lot of female musicians, and then obviously onto composers, and kind of really thinking about the whole setup. What they did was, again, it said, well, the women aren't as strong, they might not have had as long to play, they just might not be good enough. Actually, when they did them behind a screen, surprisingly, not really, the figures increased. So again, if the music spoke for itself when a woman was stood up playing in the audition, then actually it wouldn't have an effect. But they had to hide the fact that it was a woman or a man to then get a positive reaction. I'm going to skip that. It's a bit of other stats. So experiments have shown that the brain categorised people by race in less than 100 milliseconds, 1/10 of a second, before determining sex. So again, our brains, very, very complicated. I look at somebody, I just see them as a person. They're just, them. Actually, our brain has already done the work. It's already made that association. It's, doing it before you can even think. So that's another thing to consider. It's not about saying you as a person have consciously chosen to go, that person's black, that person's Chinese, that person's white. It's actually, your brain has already done that. It's wired to do that. Why is it wired to do that? So this is a bit of the sciencey bit. So amygdala, fight or flight response, and again, there's a lot of detail around the unconscious bias and the kind of neuroscience behind it. But kind of the kind of simplest form is really to think about, in the old days, we had, mammoths, back to cavemen. Anybody that was different to them was scary, it was different, fire bad, big mammoth bad, oh my God, I've got to hide, got to run away. Your body had to react. Times were simpler. It was very obvious that your brain knew that's bad, run. But actually, we've evolved. And we're still doing that, probably more emotionally and mentally. So one of the things that if you kind of do more of a kind of deep dive into unconscious bias, you can start to think about what are your own mammoths? What are the things that make you go, I don't really like that, I'm not really sure. It doesn't have to be a big, scary physical manifestation of anything, but it's often things, people, situations. It's something that's different, something that jars, something that you might just doesn't feel right. But actually, this is something that our body has to do because we have to kind of live. And what then that happens is that we have a preference for a group, and we start to call it the in-group and the out-group. The in-group is you. It's the things that's like you, the people like you, the kind of things that feel comfortable. And actually, anything else is the out-group. And we tend to then homogenise the out-group. Anything that is not aligned to kind of something that you feel is comfortable or part of you, then actually it's a bit different, just doesn't feel right. And that's where we start to generalise. Our brain has found a way to go, they're other, they're a bit different. I'm not really quite sure. So again, our body has evolved in that way. So when people talk about, I try not to be, biased, I try not to kind of make these, decisions. Actually, your brain has already done that initially. It's what you do with that information afterwards. It's what decisions you actually make. Right, just checking time. So give you another bit of stats. So brain images. So brain scans have found that white subjects respond to a greater activation of the amygdala when shown images of black faces than when shown images of white faces, and vice versa happens. The only time this hasn't happened is when they have people who've grown up in mixed households. So if you've grown up with somebody from 2 different backgrounds, different races, actually what they find is that they don't have the alarm because it's normal. It's norm. Having somebody say black, white, Asian, white, that's kind of just normal. Whereas if you don't have that, if you don't have the socialisation, because the in-groups and the out-groups aren't just about, well, I've got friends who are a bit different, or I've got, I know people who work with people like that. That's not enough to make them into your in-group. Your in-group is about socialisation, it's about community, it's about time, effort spent, it's about feeling that other stuff isn't weird and different. Your body feels, actually, I'm comfortable with that. There are more experiences that we share than we don't, but our body has found a way to just focus on protecting yourself, to making sure that you're kind of safe and that we're risk averse. And what that will do is it will take us down that safe option all the time. So, there's loads of different biases. So if you look at various studies, you've got like up to 150 different types of biases. It's people like us, people who talk like us, halo and horns effect. They've got one positive trait, all of a sudden you see them, generally they're just brilliant. And I'm sure you've all got examples of people that you know. I'm sure you don't do it yourselves, but I'm sure colleagues or friends that you go, they just don't see. There's lots of things wrong with this person, but they only just see that they're wonderful because of this. People have with children growing up, you might feel that you were the kind of child that grew up that you couldn't do it right, doesn't matter what you did, it wasn't good enough. But actually somebody else, regardless of what they did, everybody thought they were wonderful. It manifests itself in different ways. Beauty bias. So another thing is around, so there's one around height. So they did a study of CEOs and they looked at it and said that over 90% of CEOs are above average height. Now, there's a question there again. If you're taller, are you just more predisposed to being better at being a CEO? But it's, again, studies have shown if you're more beautiful, what's beauty? If you're taller, it does affect your career, it affects your life. People are more likely to open doors for you or not. But again, it's another way to think about the fact of we start to, as a culture, as a community, we start to kind of really start to create associations. They're tall, they must be strong, they must be kind of confident, they must be overpowering. They walk into a room, people listen, all of a sudden they're great. God, they're 5'4", they walk a bit funny. Actually, all of a sudden you might think you're judging them on their piece of paper, but actually are you? So it's another kind of form of it. So the effects, I'll come to the last few slides. So how does it affect us? So I'm saying your brain works at 1,000,000 miles an hour, you're processing all these thoughts, but actually, what does that mean? Well, a lot of it we talk about, I'll go back to the bottom one, the microaffirmations. So one of the things that, one of the effects is around micromessages. So it's things that leak out. So often they're not just big things. If you don't recruit people, if you don't manage people, if you don't work in a big company, it's not about that. It's about generally in life, day to day. Who do you smile at? Who do you, kind of have a warm rapport with? Who do you kind of, when you're, do you text when you're talking to some people but pay more attention when you're talking to other people? Do you mispronounce people's names? There's lots of different things that come out with micromessages, and it tends to be quite a powerful one, that you end up with a situation that somebody feels, actually, they don't like me. And you might have felt that, I expect, at some point in your life where you've gone, they just don't like me. And you've gone, well, what do you mean they don't like you? And you go, well, there's just something. And often it's lots of little things. It's not one big thing. There's loads of stuff in terms of counteracting. I'm going to move that. Counteracting bias. This slide is to kind of just give you that sense of actually, think about yourself. If you're the one person in that room that's different, whatever different is, think about how that person feels. Think about how you include that person. Think about how you feel. But also, diversity is brilliant for everybody in inclusion. It's not around saying we need to get diverse people in my friend group or in my work group because then all of a sudden I'm a better person. It's actually around, we are human beings. We start to create better ideas. We start to, have different experiences. Actually, when they've done organisational studies, they've found that when you have a more diverse team than a homogenous team, the whole of the team start to improve in terms of their innovation. It's not just the person who's diverse who's going to have diverse ideas. It's not about that. It's about lacking groupthink. Often everybody else will smile and nod because they feel it's the right thing to do. The more you bring difference in that, the more everybody else feels that they can start to kind of, come up with different ideas. So I am going to go. So what are you most likely to, why are you most likely to act on your unconscious bias? Well, stress is a big thing. Like I mentioned, shortcuts, your brain wants to come up with something, needs to just get things done. I need to just, make a decision right now. Actually, we are working under pressure continually, but that's where our brain will take that shortcut. It will go with what's familiar, it will go with what's easy, it will go with what we go, gut instinct, it feels right, they seem the best person, or this sounds brilliant, or actually, that plays a bit jarring, or I'm really not sure whether audiences will like it. A lot of that is we're making those decisions as well, not because we're stepping back and going, really in the grand scheme of things, how will that impact? How will this change things? Could this make things better? Actually, am I genuinely judging this person or this piece of content in a fair and objective way? Actually, you can't stop your biases from happening. What you can do is start to think about what are you going to put in place to slow yourself down, to really think about what you do, why you do it, and how you do it. And some of it is also around other people. Check in with other people, sleep on it. One of my favourite studies is they did a study of judges in Israel, and they found that you were more likely to get a custodial sentence, or I think it was about parole, before lunch, when they were hungry. It changed after lunch. And that was a really interesting study that you go, food affects your behaviour. And you think you're all very great and proper, but actually they found that hunger just affects you. It starves your brain of sugar. I'm going to do that. And my favourite one is that, which is my favourite slide that I have, which is just something to always think about. I just think when you're in a bit of just have a think about the fact that actually it is just desserts. And you know what? That can't be that bad. So, I think it's just really important to kind of think about what you're doing, why you're doing it, how you're doing it. And then my favourite quote, and Aesha in, which is, we don't see things as they are, we see them as we are. And I think that's, again, something to take away. We often think, again, I am really trying really hard and I'm being the best person. Absolutely. I'm sure you're all fantastic, lovely, wonderful beings. But we can all do something different. We can all make a change. I haven't gone through any of that stuff. I'm really, really conscious of that. And my light's flashing like red 0, 0, 0, 0, which means get off the stage. So I'm not going to go through that. There is loads and loads more. So I do apologise for literally going psh and probably missing about 20 of my slides. But hopefully you've just got a sense of it. It does exist. There's lots of different theories, different models about how it manifests it. Can you change it? How does, what kind of can we do? How does it genuinely kind of change our perceptions of why we do things? I think ultimately what it shows is that, there's lots of greatness in this world. There's lots of creativity. There's lots of great thoughts. And actually a lot of the time that we want to watch or feel or listen to certain music, it's because we are socialised with it. We know it. It's familiar. Think about when you're growing up, the music you listen to, maybe your parents listen to it. Maybe it was on the radio a lot. Songs we hear for the first time, might not like them. Hear them in a different context. Hear them in a film. See them on a stage when it was really resonated with you, the storyline. All of a sudden we make a connection and we love it. And so that's the thing that you've got to remember. A lot of the things that we do, we're very complicated, but actually we're also very simple. Okay, thank you.